Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing by far the most underrated Pokemon in the entire Master League. It doesn't even get to 3,500 combat power, however, it completely destroys Therian Landorus, it defeats Dialga, which is the most common core pairing with Therian Landorus, and it also destroys Kyogre, which so many people are bringing back to help fight back against all the Landorus. This is level 50 Verizion, and it has now risen dramatically to be an incredibly good option for climbing in this current Open Master League meta. Hopping into the first match, picking up an amazing lead, Verizion into Kyogre. Opponent safe switches into a Therian Landorus, and right off the bat, Verizion doing what it's supposed to, just completely core breaking an opponent's team to shreds. Due to the fact that Landorus all runs Sandsear Storm now instead of Superpower, Landorus is completely walled by Verizion, meaning that even in the 2-shield with non-stop Sandsear Storm debuffs, Verizion is actually able to emerge victorious. I'm going to bank some energy on the Verizion, and now I can send in Avalugg. Avalugg will be met with the Sandsear Storm from the Landorus, but thankfully that is still going to allow me to get a farm down. In comes Kyogre. I can fire off some Rock Slides here just to get a little bit of chip damage, and mainly, I'm just looking to stall the switch clock, so that way, my opponent is still going to have their Kyogre stuck against that Verizion. They do get the full farm down, but that's okay. I'm going to wait until my clock hits 0, and then it's Verizion time. In comes Verizion, in the back is Dialga, and the opponent is triple weak. So many people are just not preparing for Verizion as a Master League threat, and it absolutely shreds at the moment. I went 9-1 with it immediately after putting it on the team, and as you can see, we do have a pretty fun team here with the Therian Landorus, and we have the Hisuian Avalugg in the back, so it's not like we're really relying on something like a Dialga to help carry the team. Verizion was putting in an insane amount of work, and now it sees another good lead in the next match as I lead into a Therian Landorus. My opponent shields the first charge attack. I have zero desire to shield in this matchup. I decide to fire off the Leaf Blade on alignment there just because I want to get some chip damage before they debuff me again, and my new goal is to bank some energy and then eventually save switch into my own Landorus. If they're staying in, they've got to be weak, so the energy on the Verizion should be very useful later in the match. So I'm going to bank quite a lot of energy here, my opponent going for Sandsear Storm after Sandsear Storm, and that's perfectly okay with me. I can bring in my own Landorus. I know that I tank a Stone Edge, so I'm very comfortable letting this through. My opponent baits with a Sandsear Storm, and they're going to send in Zacian. Honestly, this works out great for me. I get to debuff the Zacian again and again and again. I'm going to farm up and go for the Sandsear Storm on charge attack priority to a Play Rough. The Sandsear Storm is going to connect. They are now 2 stages debuff, which means my Landorus is not phased by a Play Rough here whatsoever. They go for the Play Rough. That does absolutely nothing. Landorus is going to farm up and again go for the Sandsear Storm on charge attack priority, this time to a Wild Charge. The Sandsear Storm will pick up the knockout. My opponent can send back in the Landorus, but instead they send in their final Pokemon, which is Dialga. And I decide to aggressively pivot here into Hisuian Avalugg. Hisuian Avalugg does win the 2-shield versus Dialga, so in the 2-to-1s, I should be in a very good spot. And it's very uncomfortable for my opponent to try and switch to Landorus in, knowing they're going to be taking double super effective damage from the Powder Snows. I'm looking to overfarm now, so that way, if they switch in, I have energy ready to go. The Icy Wind is going to connect, continuing to farm up, Dialga firing off their next charge attack. I've debuffed them quite a few times. It is still going to be enough to knock out, however. I'm going to send in Verizion, and they're switching into the Landorus. Leaf Blade is going to connect. I'm going for Leaf Blade number 2, and they are firmly in Sandsear Storm range here. So after grabbing the shield, I can switch into my Landorus and snipe with the Sandsear Storm. That poor Landorus just falls under a barrage of charge attacks. Dialga realizes it does not have a win con, and my opponent just lets me farm them down and take the win. Hopping into the next match, leading Verizion into Dialga, and once again, Verizion putting in some very nice work on the lead here for me. As we go, the leads weren't all super favorable, so we will get to see some potentially losing leads as well. I end up safe switching into the Landorus. My opponent, I believe, plays to a CMP tie that they definitely do not win as they fire off the Iron Head. I've already debuffed them, so I have no reason to go for a potential shield. My opponent sends in the Dragonite, and I'm not able to make it to the Stone Edge, but I got close. Can I fool my opponent? Yes, they end up shielding. I was short, and now I can send in the Avalugg. I'm not expecting them to go for the superpower right off the bat, so I'm going to let this go, and it is the Dragon Claw bait. That does absolutely nothing. Opponent trying to go for charge attack priority, but I'm going to commit the shield and look to overfarm. They go for another Dragon Claw bait. At this point, I just need to get rid of the Dragonite. Dragonite is extremely threatening to Verizion, so I'm just going to pick up the knockout with the Icy Wind. Opponent is going to send in the Dialga. I can look to overfarm with the Avalugg and fire off the Icy Wind. Icy Wind should be able to pick up the knockout. What is that final Pokemon? And Landorus just has nowhere to run against this entire team, and my opponent resigns the match. We've got a pretty big core breaker on the lead in the next match, leading the Verizion into Solgaleo. I save switch into the Therian Landorus, which is basically my only counter. My opponent isn't going to stay in, however, they're going to send in Kyogre, and this is really, really tough. I did need to bait out the Kyogre, as of course Kyogre would completely crush the Avalugg, but man, this is really not an amazing spot to be in. I will be able to get some energy on the Verizion, and I'm going to need it to apply chip damage to the Solgaleo if I'm going to have any chance in this game. My opponent thankfully does not have Blizzard. I know shielded with the understanding that if they did have Blizzard, I would just concede the match because I didn't have a win con, but since they don't, I will continue to play it out. I have so much energy here, and my opponent is going to send back in the Solgaleo. Neutral Sacred Swords do not do a lot of damage here. This is a Solgaleo compared to a Master League Verizion. There is a massive difference in terms of the stat product here. However, I'm just going to get whatever chip damage I possibly can with all of these Sacred Swords. So I go for Sacred Sword number 2, and I'm going for Sacred Sword number 3. And this is going to get my opponent below half HP, and now it's time. In comes Avalugg. My opponent has farmed up some energy here. I think I have to make a call. I no shield. It's just the Psychic Fangs. And by calling the Psychic Fangs, I'm suddenly in an okay position here, because I'm fully expecting it's going to be the Zygarde in the back. They're shielding like it's the Zygarde in the back. I mean, it's a Solgaleo. It's always paired with the Zygarde in the back. And I have double super effective damage that I can apply with the Powder Snow and the Icy Wind. And they can debuff my defense, but I'm just going to keep debuffing their attack with the Icy Winds. Continuing to farm up here, I think my winning play is going to be to make a catch. So I'm going to farm up energy here with the Avalugg, switch into Verizion, and I get the catch. The low health Verizion absorbing that damage in the back. That is not what I was expecting to see, but this energy will be able to put in amazing work. It's a Reshiram in the back. I'm able to make it to the back-to-back rock slides. That's going to be goodbye to the Reshiram. Back in comes the Solgaleo. Solgaleo unable to make it to a charge attack, and despite a completely nightmare lead, we're able to take the win. Speaking of nightmare leads, look what we got in the next match. Verizion into Giratina Origin. Immediate save switch into the Landorus, and again, unless an opponent has basically a Kyogre to switch into a Landorus, there's not really much of anything that can comfortably switch in. So a lot of the times, if you lose leads, you're going to find opponents just staying in this matchup, and that works out great for you, as you can just continually apply damage with the Sandsear Storms. I ended up no shielding the first charge attack. In hindsight, I probably should have shielded the first, as that way, of course, I would have been shielding the move that does the most damage. Whereas now, I'm shielding a debuffed move, and that is actually going to end up costing me here, as my opponent is going to go for the heavily debuffed Ominous Wind, but because I shielded a debuffed move instead of the heavy hitting move, unfortunately, I am not going to be able to win switch. I send in the Avalugg, opponent switches in Dialga, and this works out very nicely for me. I can send in the Verizion. Verizion's going to do extremely well here, as I can fire off the back-to-back Sacred Swords. Sacred Sword number 1 is going to connect. I'm looking to farm up so I can make it to a potential Leaf Blade versus the Giratina. But suddenly, a thought creeps into the back of my mind. If they gave up switch after fighting for it, they probably wanted to bait back out the Verizion, and them shielding the Leaf Blade here confirms it. They're weak to the Verizion in the back, and unfortunately, my Verizion is just too low now, so I let this go. I have to hope that Avalugg can win it, but it's Melmetal in the back. Melmetal hardly ever played in High Elo Master League, just due to the fact that it's just very clunky overall, and there's oftentimes just significantly better options. But man, that is like the last Pokemon I was hoping to see here, and I end up shielding a Rock Slide as well. Rock Slide, of course, only single super effective, whereas the superpower is double super effective. I've debuffed them a couple times, but they can just build up to the back-to-back superpowers. Hisuian Avalugg, just an incredible core breaker. but it just cannot handle back-to-back superpowers here, even with the debuffs, and we do take that loss. Moving into the next match, same lead as last game, Verizion into Giratina Origin. Let's get a little bit of redemption. Again, they're staying in. A lot of Giratina teams don't have Kyogre in the back because then they would just instantly lose to a Dialga lead, and so the Landorus safe switch, they're forced to stay in here and play it out. I'm going to play it differently, however. I shield up the Shadow Ball, opponent is going to switch in a Zacian, and this is such a fine spot to be in as the Landorus. I can apply Sandsear Storm debuffs, my opponent is going to fire off a charge attack, but at -1, this is not going to KO whatsoever. So I can look to farm up quite a lot of energy, fire off the Sandsear Storm, and this is going to do a lot of damage. The Sandsear Storm is going to connect. I'm able to make it to one more Sandsear Storm. My opponent has to shield or they will get knocked out here, and they concede switch advantage. They send in the Giratina, but look at this. The one game where Verizion has absolutely no play. Landorus putting the team on his back, but wait, their final Pokemon is weak to Verizion, as in comes Therian Landorus. They were so strong against the Verizion, but there we see it, the Pokemon that's weak to Verizion, and Verizion now gets to capitalize. Firing off the Leaf Blade, opponent is going to commit the shield, but man, I am 100% okay with this. I'm just never shielding my Verizion in this matchup. They can use all the shields that they want to, and they end up firing off a charge attack on alignment, giving me an entire double kick for free. They go for the Stone Edge, but guess what? That is not much better, as Verizion is just a wall to this new moveset. The Leaf Blade connects, they send in the Giratina, they're able to snipe my energy, but I don't need this energy to win this game. So I'm fine with letting this go, and instead, just sending in the Avalugg. If they make the Shadow Ball, I'll go for a catch, but this should only be an Ominous Wind, so I can absorb this energy no problem. It is just going to be the Ominous Wind. I'm going to get the full farm down, back in comes the Landorus. Landorus is going to fire off the Sandsear Storm. I have one shield left, so I may as well use it, and I'm able to build up to the back-to-back Icy Winds. At this point, this game is very comfortably over. My opponent is going to shield, so I decided to go for a little bit of a cheeky play, and we're going to go for the Rock Slide BM to take that win. Moving into the next match, leading Verizion into Primarina. Primarina, of course, is a Charmer, but it's a Charmer that's taking super effective damage from Leaf Blade. So they're staying in here. I'm just going to fire off the Leaf Blade, get some very nice damage onto the Primarina, and then save switch into the Landorus. My opponent is going to send in Kyogre. Oh my goodness, they are so weak to Verizion so far. I fire off the Sandsear Storm. My goal here is just to get this Kyogre as low as possible. I decide instead of going for another Sandsear Storm to just go for the Stone Edge, hoping it will knock out, but the Stone Edge barely does not. Kyogre exiting with, I believe it was 9 waterfalls, which means they are short of a blizzard. It is going to be the Origin Pulse as I'm able to get that farm down. Opponent is not going to send in the Primarina. Instead, they send in Giratina. This Leaf Blade, not too impactful, but it does allow my Switch Clock to come up. And now the Primarina is going to have to deal with the debuffing Icy Winds from the Avalugg. Avalugg, Icy Wind will be shielded, and these Powder Stones are getting it to a point where an Icy Wind might actually KO. They're going for the Disarming Voice. I'm going to be shielding up because I want to preserve HP on the Avalugg. If I can keep myself out of -1 Shadow Ball range, this should just be winning for me. The Icy Wind connects, I get the farm down, and now my opponent, I mean, they're in just such a tough position where I can shield up as they full send the Shadow Ball, go for the Icy Wind, and I am outside of a range where a -1 Icy Wind will KO. So at this point, this game is just won. They can fire off the Shadow Ball. Switching out is definitely a loose con, trying to go for the catch, so we're just going to stay in here. Apply the pressure. The Shadow Ball is not going to knock out Hisuian Avalugg, making it to the Icy Wind, and the opponent is going to resign the match as that charge attack is thrown. Hopping to the final match, leading Verizion into Zacian. Not a good lead, but when there's a bad lead, we're just going to be sending in the Landorus. Landorus firing off Sandsear Storm. Sandsear Storm will be no-shielded by my opponent, and if they're throwing energy, I'm okay with this. I tank whatever they throw. They're debuffed. Opponent goes for a Wild Charge. They've got to be so weak if they're going for a debuff Wild Charge, and they are. They send in their own Landorus. I'm firing off a Sandsear Storm. My opponent ends up calling it, but honestly, that kind of works out okay, because due to the debuff, I should now live their Stone Edge, and Switch Clock will be up very soon. So I'm able to preserve the Landorus for a catch, if I need it for later. And now, clock's up. In comes the Avalugg. Goodbye, Landorus. And I have enough energy that I can apply a lot of pressure onto whatever they send in, and it's Dialga. And up 4 Powder Snows, I'm in a very good position. I'm going to continue to apply pressure to the Dialga. Dialga is going to be able to grab a shield with an Iron Head, but when they get to the second Iron Head, I can try and potentially go for a catch onto Verizion, and even if I don't get the catch, the goal will be to bait back out that Zacian. Zacian, by going for the Wild Charge, they're probably running Wild Charge in close combat, which means they can only hit for neutral onto the Verizion. So if I can bait it back out, I should be in a pretty good spot. I go for the catch is unsuccessful. In comes that Zacian, and I'm not throwing my charge attack yet. I'm waiting till they fire the close combat, because after they go for the close combat, of course, now Leaf Blade will very comfortably KO, and I have a choice to make. I decide to use the final shield of the match here. The reason being is I'm outside of Iron Head range. They have to Draco to pick up a knockout, and they're going to fire off a charge attack with the Dialga. Is it going to be the Draco Meteor? It's not. It's the Iron Head. Iron Head will not KO, and after the Sacred Sword, my switch clock will be up, and I should just be able to send in the Avalugg, and Avalugg is going to make it to the Icy Wind, and we're going to take the win. All in all, I was amazed at how well this team worked, and these battles were done starting at around Legend Elo and climbing up to 3100. This team, Verizion and Avalugg, just form a truly amazing core. I believe it was Elodie Colo who I saw first running that core, and then pairing it up with the Landorus as well. Big shoutouts to Ollie for the advice on pairing up Verizion with Landorus. And this team, with a couple recommendations, just went unbelievably positive for me. Verizion genuinely feels like an amazing pick for climbing at the current moment. Everyone has Landorus, and Landorus's most common core pairing, Dialga, and the thing that beats Landorus, Kyogre, are all weak to the Verizion. So it feels very weird saying that a Pokemon that doesn't even make 3500 combat power is a good one for climbing, but to me, Verizion is genuinely really good right now. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.